subscribe for part 2. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to tell this kind of story. Growing up, I was always the logical one, the skeptic in the group. Ghosts, demons, curses, they were all just figments of overactive imaginations to me. That was until last winter, when everything I believed in was shattered. I want to be clear from the start. What I'm about to tell you isn't some spooky campfire tale. This is what really happened to me, and to this day, I still can't sleep without every light in the house on. It started on a normal Saturday evening. My girlfriend, Emily, and I had just moved into a new apartment on the outskirts of town. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small one-bedroom place in an older building, but it was cozy, and it was ours. We were excited to start this new chapter of our lives together. The rent was cheap, which should have been the first red flag, but we were young and broke, so we didn't question it. The first few nights in the apartment were uneventful. We were busy unpacking, arranging furniture, and getting settled in. But by the fourth night, things started to feel off. It was nothing I could put my finger on at first, just a vague sense of unease that seemed to hang in the air. Emily felt it too. She joked about the place being haunted, but I could tell she wasn't entirely kidding. On the fifth night, we were lying in bed, drifting off to sleep, when we heard a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere in the apartment. At first, we thought it was just the pipes or maybe the neighbors, but the sound was too deliberate, too intentional. It was coming from the walls, moving from one side of the room to the other, as if someone or something was walking around inside them. We both sat up in bed, straining to listen. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, until it was right next to us, as if it was coming from inside the wall behind our bed. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I forced myself to get up and check it out. I turned on the lights and slowly approached the wall, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch it. There was nothing there, no sign of anything unusual, but the tapping had stopped. Emily was staring at me, wide-eyed, from the bed. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound to return, but it didn't. The apartment was silent. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something was in there with us. The next morning, we tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just the building settling, or some kind of animal in the walls. We had to be rational about this, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. Things escalated quickly after that. Over the next few days, the tapping became a regular occurrence. Sometimes it would be in the walls, other times it seemed to come from the ceiling or the floor. It was always at night, always when we were in bed, trying to sleep. And it wasn't just the sound that was disturbing, it was the way it seemed to follow us, like it was trying to get closer, trying to find us. We called the landlord, but he just shrugged it off, said the building was old, and these kinds of things happened. We were on our own. That's when Emily started to get sick. It started with headaches, then nausea, and eventually she was bedridden. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with her, but she was getting worse by the day. She said she felt like something was draining the life out of her. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I spent hours online researching the history of the building, looking for any explanation, but I couldn't find anything that made sense. And then one night I saw it. It was around 2 a.m., and I was lying in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Emily was next to me, her breathing shallow and labored. The room was dark, but I could just make out the shape of the door in the dim light. That's when I saw the shadow. It was standing in the doorway, a tall, dark figure, barely visible in the darkness. At first I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but then it moved. It stepped into the room, slowly, deliberately, like it was taking its time, savoring the moment. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to even breathe. The shadow moved closer, and as it did, the temperature in the room dropped. I could see my breath in the air, feel the cold seeping into my bones. The shadow stopped at the foot of the bed, and for a moment, it just stood there, watching us. Then, without warning, it lunged. The next thing I remember is waking up on the floor, drenched in sweat. The room was warm again, the shadow was gone, but the sense of dread lingered. I scrambled to my feet and checked on Emily. She was still in bed, but her condition had worsened. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and she was shivering uncontrollably, despite the warmth in the room. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but I knew no one would believe me. I barely believed it myself. I tried to convince myself that it was just a nightmare, but deep down I knew it was real. Something was in that apartment with us, and it wanted Emily. I spent the next few days desperately trying to protect her. I bought sage, salt, anything I could think of to ward off whatever was haunting us. I even reached out to a local paranormal investigator, but he was skeptical and said he couldn't help without more evidence. Meanwhile, Emily was fading. She was barely conscious, and when she was awake, she was delirious, talking about shadows and whispers, things she shouldn't have known about. Then, one night, she told me something that made my blood run cold. We were sitting in the living room, and she was staring off into space, her eyes glassy and unfocused. Suddenly, she turned to me and said, "It wants to take me." I asked her what she meant, but she just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's been watching us, waiting for the right moment. It's going to take me away, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." I was horrified. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that we would find a way to stop it, but I knew she was right. Whatever was in that apartment was far beyond anything I could understand or fight. I felt utterly helpless. That night I didn't sleep at all. I sat by the bed, watching over Emily, clutching a rosary I hadn't touched since childhood. The hours dragged on, and just when I thought we might have made it through the night, I heard it again, the tapping, but this time it was different. It wasn't coming from the walls or the ceiling. It was coming from the bed. My heart stopped. I turned to look at Emily, but she was asleep, unaware of the sound. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, until it was pounding in my ears. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, the shadow. It was back, standing at the foot of the bed, just like before. But this time, it wasn't alone. There were more of them, dozens of dark figures, all standing around the bed, watching us. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen in place, unable to move or even think. The shadows began to close in, surrounding the bed, their cold presence pressing in on me from all sides. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone. The room was empty, and the tapping had stopped. I collapsed onto the bed, my heart racing, my body trembling. I didn't know how much more of this I could take. The next morning, I made a decision. We had to leave. I didn't care about the lease or the money we had spent. I just wanted to get Emily out of there before it was too late. I started packing our things, but as I did, I noticed something strange. The walls of the apartment, which had always been a dull, off-white color, were now covered in dark stains, almost like mold, but thicker, more viscous. They were everywhere, spreading across the walls, the ceiling, the floor. It was like the apartment was rotting from the inside out. I grabbed Emily and told her we had to go, but she was too weak to stand. I had to carry her out to the car, her body limp in my arms. As I did, I could feel the cold seeping into my skin again, that same unnatural chill that had accompanied the shadows. I knew we were running out of time. We drove to the nearest hotel and checked in, hoping to put some distance between us and whatever was in that apartment. I thought we were safe, that we had escaped, but I was wrong. That night, Emily's condition took a turn for the worse. She was burning up with fever, her body convulsing as if she was being attacked.